listen to me as I slow it down. Dreams are yours if you want it. Enjoy the ride, 'cause those ups and those downs is what makes it worth it.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Nitty Gritty podcast. We are on episode 4. Time has just flown by. But last episode I started off by saying how ungodly sore I was from running and that I wasn't going to do it again and that I was going to stick to my Stairmaster for cardio. Well, I did it again. And to no surprise, I am ungodly sore again. I was all packed up and I was ready to go to the gym. And then I realized that I didn't have my keys and I didn't have my wallet. So the two main things you need to be able to go anywhere. I ended up leaving them in Jacob's car. So I thought, okay, well, I'll at least go get a run than do absolutely nothing. So it was for a good reason, but I am just feeling it today. But I've been slowly incorporating things into my routine that I haven't done in a long time. But I started to work abs again, which in bikini, you don't really need a lot of ab definition. And so it's really dependent on your physique. And that's honestly why I never really had it in my routine, because I didn't really need it. The first couple of times when I competed, I had a fine amount of ab definition. But I think what has changed is throughout my first couple of competitions, I was working as a personal trainer. So I was teaching people face to face. So I would have to show them the exercises we were doing, and a lot of them would be core exercises. And so I was indirectly getting my core work through that, versus now that I'm doing all my coaching online, I'm not having to do all of those examples and show all of those ab movements. And so it just kind of cut my core work down. And on my last competition, I did notice a slight difference and knew that it probably would be best if I would slowly start incorporating abs back in. So I'm doing that just a couple times a week, really focusing on deep ab exercises, so vacuums and just really good deep core stabilization, because I feel like that's not helping me with just ab definition, but it's also helping me create a stronger base for all of my other weightlifting movements, and it helps me work my abs and my core for that base and not my lower back, especially in my lower body and glute movements. Being able to properly brace your core and let that lower back relax and isolate the glutes, it makes a big difference. But I made a whole other separate video on that. So if you want to see more on that, just go to my videos and you can watch an in-depth, explanation on that. But otherwise, speaking of cardio, cardio shows, so I just started a new Netflix series called Griselda. If you have a Netflix account, I have guaranteed that you've seen the advertisement of it, because it's #1 on Netflix and there's playing everywhere. And I finally decided to watch it because it has Sofia Vergara in it, and it is so freaking good. Not gonna lie, I already finished all of it. That was my cardio show for the last 2 weeks, but that was just a phenomenal show. Jacob and I watch Modern Family at the end of the night, and we've been watching Modern Family for a while now because they have a lot of freaking seasons. So when I saw that Sofia Vergara was in another show, that's kind of what made me want to watch it. But it's just funny seeing her in a totally different character where she's this mob boss and she's from Colombia handling all these drugs, money, murder, sex, all of that stuff. And then watching her on Modern Family and it's the complete opposite. But if you have not seen that show, I would highly recommend it. It's a really good cardio show because it is in Spanish and English, so there is a lot of subtitles. So it's a show where you actually have to watch it unless you're bilingual. So it's not a show where you could do the dishes or do something and just listen to it. You need to actually watch it. So that's why it's good for cardio. But hands down, probably one of my favorite shows right now. That was phenomenal. But it's also kind of cool because one of my goals for this year was to learn Spanish. So just incorporating, like, you know, just a little bit of Spanish in different ways helps out. Still didn't really understand anything. Like, I still had to read all of the subtitles, but, you know, a little word every now and again, I'll be like, ooh, I know what that is. But my goal is to be fluent in Spanish in 2 years. It's only been 165 days that I've been learning. Not that I'm counting or anything. But I did take 4 years in high school, so it's slowly coming back. But it's just really good to work on other goals that aren't just physical, like having goals that are going to help you out financially, that are going to help you out, you know, in other facets of life than just like physical. But anyway, let's go ahead, and I wanted to dive into today's topic. What's wrong, little guy? Do you want to come here? Is there a toy down here? There's literally no toy. Do you want me to just find one for you? That's not how it works. Okay, there you go. Hey, kids, what can you do? But anyway, back to what I was saying. Today's podcast topic is things that are holding you back from growing muscle. Everyone has some trouble area that they swear that they cannot grow. For girls, a lot of the time it's the glutes. For some people, it's the shoulders. And I used to think that I could not grow my glutes. I had a goal of growing glutes for several years now, and I thought that I was training them hard. I thought that I was doing everything right, and I was just not seeing a lot of improvement. So I just kind of went with that saying that everybody else hears on the internet of, oh, I just have bad genetics, I can't grow blank body part. And it was a lot easier to just tell myself that lie and just think that I'm going to be stuck with what I have. But once I actually stepped back and truly evaluated what was going on, I was able to make the changes necessary, and then I was finally able to see that muscle area grow. So the very first thing that is holding you back from growing muscle, and I think this encompasses all the other points that we're going to be talking about as well, and that is mindset. A lot of people, they say they want to grow, but when it actually comes to doing what you need to do and seeing the things change, they get scared and then they hold themselves back. So they say they might want to grow and get bigger glutes, but they're not having the mindset where they're fully committing to it. And like I said, I was that person as well. In the beginning of my fitness journey, I knew that I needed to grow muscle in some areas, but at the same time, I was always afraid of getting too big. Not necessarily like muscular wise, but body fat wise. I always wanted to be leaner. I always wanted to be on a cut. I just always wanted to look thinner, but then more toned. And I knew that becoming toned meant that you needed to have muscle to begin with. So I realized that yes, I was wanting to grow muscle, but in the back of my head, I was always still focused on losing weight. And when you're trying to grow muscle, you should not be eating the same type of nutrition as you would when you are trying to lose weight. Now, can you lose weight and gain muscle at the same time? Sure, but it's not going to be nearly as effective. So you're going to see your best results when you can just buckle down and fully commit to one goal. Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to gain muscle? You pick your sides and you freaking stick to it and do as much as you can to support that goal. So when you're wanting to build muscle, optimally, you want to be eating at your highest metabolism point, maybe just a little bit over that amount. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. When they try to build muscle, they go into this extreme bulk and they're eating like 300, 500 calories over their maintenance. if you do that, you might be gaining more muscle, but you're going to be gaining a lot of excess body fat with it. And even though, yes, you're making your goal of gaining muscle, you're really just going to be biting yourself in the butt with all of that extra body fat you're gaining, because you're just going to have to lose it on your next cut. And it's inevitable of when you go through a cut, you're probably going to lose a little bit of muscle mass. So the extra muscle that you would theoretically gain from eating those extra calories, you're just losing it in the long run of when you're going on that cut in the future. So best case scenario is just to eat just a tiny bit above your maintenance, so you're not gaining a whole bunch of unnecessary body fat, you're still optimally gaining as much muscle as possible, and you're not having to give yourself more work in the end of having more to lose after your bulk. So then a lot of people ask, well, how much should I be eating over my maintenance amount? So if you want to get like really sciencey about it, there is equations and stuff that you can do to figure out like, okay, how many calories is in 1 pound of muscle? And then how much calories are you going to burn to make that 1 pound of muscle? And doing all of those equations and doing the math, it really only comes out to, I believe it was like 30 or 50 calories over your maintenance amount to like optimally build muscle. So at that point, just eat a little bit over your maintenance. If you're not strictly tracking macros, which if you're in off season, you're probably going to be doing it a little bit more loosely, you're going to have that extra 30, 50 calories without even really intentionally trying. And I know it sounds more fun to have a whole bunch of cheat meals and eat like an asshole and not have to worry about your nutrition and just slap a label on it and say, oh, I'm bulking. But in the long run, it's not going to be worth it. And you're honestly not going to feel as comfortable in your off season. And that is what really holds people back from fully committing to the process, is usually because they feel uncomfortable when they are going through a growth phase. So if you can minimize those uncomfortable feelings in that growth phase, you're going to be able to be more comfortable with it, which means you're going to be able to stick with it longer, which means you're going to be able to fully commit to it. So instead of overeating in your bulking phase, and instead of having trash nutrition during your bulking phase, have good nutrition, eat the amount of calories that's appropriate so you feel good and you'll be able to fully commit to it. So that's the first thing, is the mindset. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this reason first is because if you don't have your mindset down, it doesn't matter how your training is. It's not going to be nearly as effective if you can't actually tell yourself to follow through with it. So it's just like having the same example of, you can have the best training program in the world, but if you don't have the mindset to actually stick to it and fully commit to it, you're not going to see those results, you know? And these are all things that I have personally learned myself. I have been working out for 7 years now, and I have been able to see the most results within the last year once I've made all of these changes versus the first 6 years of my fitness journey, which is insane because in the beginning phases, that's when you would typically see more gains because this is a new program and your body's adapting to it for the first time. But because I didn't have the foundation set and I didn't have all these tools in place, I was not reaching my full potential. Versus now within the last year that I've made all of these proper changes and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, I've been able to see that much more progress. I still have days where I wake up and I look in the mirror and I'm like, a cut sounds really good right now. Like, I've been in growth season for a while. Like, I could probably go on a cut. And I try to momentarily convince myself that I should go on a mini cut. But I just knock some sense back into myself and be like, no, girl, stick to your plan, fully commit. Don't pussyfoot around it, like stick to your shit. And those thoughts are going to come up. You just have to take a second and think about the future and what's going to be best for you. Especially when you're in a growth season, you want to do it for a longer period of time so you can reap those full benefits. Versus if you're doing a growth season and you're only doing 4 weeks of it, you're not going to be able to see much progress within 4 weeks. But if you can stick with it and do it for 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, the longer you go, the more it like multiplies over time and the more progress you can see. Doing it for that short amount of time, you're not going to see that much success. And that's kind of why when people take PEDs, so performance enhancing drugs, they say if you're going to go on a cycle of it, don't go on a cycle for just 4 weeks because you're not going to be able to get the full benefits. Go on it for 6 to 8 weeks so then that way you can get the full benefits. That is a whole different topic though. That's not what this episode is going to be about because there's a lot more factors that go into that and like managing your symptoms and making sure you're not having any side effects. But the reasoning is about the same, where you don't want to do it for just a short amount of time. Fully commit to that growth season. Take a good amount of time off. So let's talk about more of the actual training side of things. So the different types of training techniques that I started incorporating that really excelled my progress in growing and building muscle. So before we go into details, let's talk about how the muscle contracts, because we need to understand what is going on in our body to fully understand how we have to use our body to actually get those results. So I'm just going to use my hands as an example. If I can actually find like an animation of what I'm talking about, I might pop it up on the screen, but more than likely you're just going to have to look at my hands and pretend that it's a muscle. So in our muscles, there are muscle fibers, and muscle fibers are basically like this tube-like thing, and they slide together like this. So when our muscles contract, those tubes slide together. So like if I'm flexing my bicep, the fibers in my muscles are sliding together. That is the muscle contraction. And then when I'm stretching out my muscle, those muscle fibers are basically sliding out. So that's every single muscle in your body. The muscle in your legs, the muscle in your glutes, the freaking muscle in your jaw that I'm using right now to talk is contracting. It's going like this. So now let's talk about how we build muscle. When we are doing something super strenuous and we're having a lot of that muscle contraction over and over, that process slowly gets broken down. So those muscle fibers start to get like small little micro tears on them. So just like small little microscopic damage. And that's why after you do a hard weightlifting session, you feel super sore. It's because of those small little micro tears in your muscle. So your body recognizes that you're essentially like micro injured. And so it sends everything in the body to that area to repair and to recover. And your body is set up as a defense mechanism. It wants to always put itself in the best position possible. So it looks at all of those little tiny damages to your muscle and it goes, I am going to fix what's wrong, but I'm also going to put a little bit extra there. So next time, if this situation happens again, I'm going to be prepared for it. So if we keep repeating that process, so we keep working out, we keep making those micro tears to our muscle keeps repairing it and adding a little bit more each time, is what is going to build muscle. We also have to think how we can continuously give a stimulus to that muscle to give it a reason to add a little bit more muscle to it. Because otherwise, if we are just consistently doing the same amount of workload over and over and over, there's really no need for our body to add that extra to it. Because we're already able to do it pretty easy, there's really no extra pressure to add anything more. So that's why in our workouts, we have to progressively make it harder over time to give the body a reason to add more muscle to our frame. So how we do that can be done in two different ways. The main way that people think about it is lifting heavier. So that is a really good way to build muscle, but that is not the only thing that you should be focusing on. Just because you lift heavier does not necessarily mean that is going to be most beneficial for you to gain muscle. And the reason for that goes back to that muscle contraction. When we are working the muscle and we're having that muscle contract, we want to make sure that that process is happening as efficiently and as fully as possible. So think of it when you're lifting up a really, really heavy weight. There is a point where when you start lifting so heavy, it feels difficult, but you're not necessarily feeling that full squeeze and that full contraction of the muscle. You're just kind of feeling a whole bunch of other muscles around your body struggling because you're just trying to get it done. So like another really good example of that is, let's take a bicep curl, for example. Let's say you take 30-pound dumbbells and you are curling that weight, and it's going to be really freaking heavy, but you can get it done. You can curl those 30 pounds. But if you drop the weight down and let's say you reduce it to 20 pounds, you can do that weight. It's going to feel a little bit easier, but at the same time, you can sit there and actually squeeze that muscle a lot harder throughout that movement. And because you're able to actually squeeze that muscle you're working, you're going to be making that movement just as hard as that 30-pound dumbbell, even though it is technically lower weight. It's because you're able to fully use your muscle and get that muscle to fully contract. So that is where it comes in. Using slightly lighter weight sometimes can be a lot better for you in gaining muscle. So that is the first training tip right there. When you're working out, every single exercise you do, you should be thinking about squeezing that muscle, feeling that muscle work. You should be able to pinpoint and know exactly what muscle you are working. And that freaking thing should burn by the time you are done with that set. If you get done with the set and you don't really feel a muscle working, you feel like you can do some extra reps, you don't really feel much of it, then that means you're doing that set wrong, and you can either squeeze more, or you can increase weight, or you can do both. And so the second thing that goes along with that is slowing down your reps and having controlled movements. If you are slowing down your reps and you're having controlled movements, you're going to be able to, at the same time, squeeze the muscle more. So these two kind of go hand in hand. But being able to slow down, having that muscle needing control of that contraction is just going to make it work even more. It's going to tear up the muscle even more, which means you're going to have more to repair, which means you are going to build more muscle on top of it as well. So when you're doing a movement, you shouldn't be just throwing that weight up and using that momentum. You should be slow, and you should be controlled throughout the whole entire thing. A really big part of the movement is the negative part. So when you are controlling the gravity in the movement. So like for example of that, in a squat. So obviously gravity wants to bring the weights down. So when you're squatting, when you're going down in that squat, gravity is going to want to pull that weight down super quick. So you're going to have to fight against it and go down super slow. When you are doing a hip thrust, same thing. Gravity's pulling that weight down. It's going to want the bottom of the hip thrust to just go straight down to the bottom. So you really have to control it and bring that hip thrust down super slow. Controlling that negative, controlling that muscle contraction, it's just going to give you so much more benefit. So when I made this realization, the very first thing that I did is I took my training program that I was doing, and the very first week I sat there and cut down my weight in all of my exercises and really focused on the form. I sat there and I thought about what muscle I'm working. I thought about squeezing the muscle the entire time. I thought about going slow. I focused on the quality of the movement and getting that muscle to contract. And then once I got that down, and then once I got more comfortable with that movement, that's when I started to increase the weight. Very slowly though, because if you increase the weight too quick, you're just going to fall back into that pattern that you were before of lifting too heavy of weight, not having good muscle contraction, and not having the quality of that rep. So being able to just take that time and honestly just maturing in the gym. When you're young, the main thing you want to focus on is just lifting heavy as fuck. You don't care about your form. You just want to be able to brag on what your weightlifting PRs are. But when you can actually mature and figure out that having good form and being able to squeeze the muscle and control the weight and having a good quality movement, that is what's actually going to benefit you way more than the amount of weight that you're able to lift. Oh my gosh, what was that? My animals are just all over me today. So this has been a crazy episode. This is like a zoo going on in the background. But all in all, those are the things that you really need to focus on to finally grow that muscle area and stop using genetics as an excuse. Usually those areas that are troublesome for you to grow is because you don't have a good mind-muscle connection with it. So like, for example, when I thought that glutes were really tough for me to grow and that it was just going to be impossible for me to get bigger glutes, my issue was that I wasn't having a good mind-muscle connection with my glutes. I wasn't able to squeeze my glutes as well as I thought I was. I wasn't having a good muscle contraction within that area. And that was what was causing the issue. That was the reason why it was my troublesome area. But once I used these techniques to fix those problems, then that's when I was able to see so much more progress. But keep in mind, growing muscle still does take time. It's not going to happen in a couple of weeks. It's going to take months. But just keep consistent, keep pushing with it, and I can guarantee that you will see the difference. If you are looking for an in-depth workout program, reach out to me. I make custom training programs for competitors or people who are just, living a healthy life and they just want to work out and learn more. Same thing with nutrition plans. Again, just reach out to me and I'm more than happy to help. But if you have any questions about this podcast topic, comment it down below and we can expand a little bit more. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching and I will talk with you guys later. Bye.
Listen to me as I